They fired him from his own company. No money, no power, no title. But what Steve Jobs did after that failure changed the world forever. Steve Jobs was not born successful. He was adopted, dropped out of college, failed publicly, and was humiliated in front of the world. Yet, from rejection and loss, he built one of the most influential companies in human history. This is not just a success story. This is a lesson about belief, resilience, and daring to think different. He started with nothing, not a metaphor, real nothing. A garage that smelled of oil and sawdust, not venture capital. A concrete floor, a wooden workbench, a soldering iron. No MBA, no network, no safety net. Just two Steves and a fever dream that computers didn't have to be cold, intimidating monoliths locked in corporate basements. They could be personal. They could be tools for the mind, for creativity, for the individual. This was the radical seed. The courage wasn't in having a billion-dollar plan. It was in trusting that tiny, defiant spark against the overwhelming consensus of what was possible. He saw the intersection of technology and the humanities not as a barren crossroad, but as fertile ground. Starting small wasn't a compromise. It was a strategic purity. It meant every decision, every circuit board, every line of code was infused with that original, unadulterated vision. There was no committee to water it down, no investor to pivot it towards safer, blander horizons. It was vision, raw and direct, translated into silicon and plastic. That garage was a universe. It proves that the most world-altering journeys often begin not with a roar, but with the quiet, deliberate act of plugging in a soldering iron and deciding to build a different future with your own hands. The lack of resources wasn't a handicap, it was the forge. It demands you to be resourceful, to see connections others miss, to rely on the sheer force of belief. It is the ultimate reminder that you don't need permission to begin. You need a vision and the grit to take the first, seemingly insignificant step. The blueprint for revolution is often drawn on a garage floor. He was fired, not from a job, from his own life's work. From the company he birthed, named, and breathed into existence. The board he hired showed him the door. Imagine the vertigo, the identity shattered, the profound personal rejection masquerading as a corporate decision. This wasn't just a setback, it was an annihilation. Most narratives would end here. The founder cast out becomes a bitter footnote. But here is the critical pivot, the moment that separates a reaction from a legacy. He didn't take the pain and let it calcify into resentment. He took the pain and used it as fuel. It was the ultimate liberation through humiliation. Stripped of the title, the office, the daily identity of Steve Jobs of Apple, he was forced to confront a more fundamental question. Who was he without the logo? The answer was not a broken man, but a beginner. The fire purified him. It burned away the distractions, the corporate politics, the noise. It left a core of white-hot creative energy. He later called it the best thing that could have ever happened to me. He wasn't just putting a positive spin on disaster, he was articulating a profound truth about creative death and rebirth. Sometimes you must be demolished to be rebuilt stronger. The world tried to write him off, and in that crushing pressure, it created a diamond. He didn't just get mad, he got focused. He didn't seek revenge, he sought renewal. The fuel of that pain powered the next decade of his life, a decade that would, ironically, make him indispensable to the very place that rejected him. It teaches that rejection is not a definition, it is an ignition. Your lowest point can become the solid ground from which you rebuild everything. Failure didn't break him. It didn't just not break him, it remade him. He entered the wilderness of failure and emerged not just resilient, but reinvented. This is the subtle, powerful distinction. Resilience implies bouncing back. He did not bounce, he launched, clearer than anything he'd breathed before. The weight of expectation was gone. The heavy mantle of visionary founder was removed. He was free, terrifyingly, exhilaratingly free to be a novice again.
Failure cleared the palate. It wiped away the assumptions, the entrenched ways of thinking at Apple that he himself had helped create. It granted him a beginner's mind, a concept he cherished. With a beginner's mind, there are no limits. No, this is how we've always done it. There is only possibility. That renewed creativity wasn't a gentle trickle, it was a geyser. It led him to explore new industries, to think about computing not as boxes, but as experiences, as tools for storytelling and education and design. The failure at Apple wasn't a full stop, it was a semicolon. The sentence of his creative life continued, but with a new, more powerful clause. He learned to trust the process, even when the process felt like free fall. He understood that failure is not the opposite of success. It is a necessary, integral part of it. It is the fertilizer. You don't avoid it, you lean into it, you dissect it, and you let its painful lessons compost into wisdom. The world tells you to fear failure. He teaches you to court its lessons, for on the other side of that disappointment is a clarity you cannot buy. He built again, from zero. Not from a soft landing, not with a golden parachute, but from the blank page of utter rejection. He didn't retreat. He didn't go consult. He started 2 companies, Next and Pixar. One aimed at the future of computing with almost obsessive perfectionism, a cube of black magnesium, an operating system of elegant purity. The other, Pixar, was a wild gamble on a fringe idea that computers could be used to tell heartfelt human stories. He invested his own money, his spirit, his relentless drive. At Pixar, he wasn't the creative genius, he was the protector of the vision, the business architect who fought for a decade of losses because he believed in the art. He built not 1, but 2 new worlds from the ground up. This is perhaps the most powerful rebuttal to failure imaginable. It's one thing to survive a fall, it's another to use the momentum of that fall to launch 2 rockets. Next would become the philosophical and technological foundation for Apple's renaissance. Pixar would revolutionize an entire art form and bring us some of the most beloved stories of a generation. He proved that the creative spirit, when undaunted, is not a single-threaded thing, it is a multiplicative force. Losing one platform didn't silence his voice, it gave him 2 new stages. He teaches that your capacity to create is not tied to your past creations. Your identity is not your last venture. It is the act of venturing itself. When you are truly at zero, you have nothing left to lose and everything left to build. They called him back. The same institution that exiled him, now a ghost of itself, hemorrhaging money and vision, dialed his number. The rejected man became the only possible savior. This is not just a poetic twist of fate, it is a masterclass in the long game of integrity. He didn't spend his exile scheming for a comeback, he spent it building masterpieces. He made himself undeniable. When Apple acquired Next, it wasn't a charity case, it was a lifeline Apple needed to grasp. He returned not with hat in hand, but with the future in his pocket, the advanced Next Step operating system. He returned with the hardened wisdom of a founder who had built and lost and built again. He returned with the serene confidence of a man who no longer needed the title to know his own worth. The savior complex is a weak thing. His return was not about salvation, it was about surgical, ruthless restoration. He slashed product lines, refocused on the core, and instilled a culture of insanely great once more. He didn't seek to prove them wrong for firing him, he was too busy making the company right. The lesson is profound. Live your truth so fully, build your capabilities so relentlessly that your redemption, should it come, is not an apology you extract, but a necessity you embody. The world often rejects the sharp edges of a visionary, only to come crawling back when it realizes it needs that very edge to cut through the mundane. Be so good, so undeniably potent in your craft that your return is inevitable. He changed technology forever, not by increment, but by revolution. The iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, these were not mere products, they were manifestos. He didn't follow market research, he despised it. People, he said, don't know what they want until you show it to them. He looked at the clunky beige computers and saw sculpture. He looked at the confusing mess of digital music and saw 1,000 songs in your pocket. He looked at the cell phone, a maze of buttons, and saw a slab of glass that could be anything. He looked at the space between a laptop and a phone and created a new category. He didn't just improve technology, he domesticated it. He wrapped it in intuition and desire. He made it feel magical, inevitable. The trend was toward complexity. He marched toward simplicity. The trend was toward features. He championed experience. He understood that technology at its best is invisible. It's the feeling of swiping a photo, of pinching to zoom, of the satisfying click of a scroll wheel. He changed the grammar of our daily lives. He proved that the highest calling of technology is not processing power, but soul. To change the world, you must first have the courage to envision a world that does not yet exist, and then the obsessive, meticulous will to drag that vision, kicking and screaming, into reality. He didn't just build things, he built the future we now take for granted. He believed in Think Different. It was more than a slogan. It was a battle cry for the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the ones who see things differently. He didn't admire them from afar. He was their champion, their gatherer, their most famous example. He believed that progress depends on the people who are not just unafraid to be wrong, but are incapable of accepting the status quo as right. These people push the human race forward, and while some may see them as the crazy ones, he saw genius. He built Apple to be a home for these minds. He created a culture where the ask wasn't, "Can you do the job?" but "Can you change the game?" This philosophy wasn't about being contrarian for its own sake. It was about a deep, fundamental faith in human creativity and intuition over mere calculation. It was about the courage to stand alone with an idea, to tolerate the ridicule before the applause, to trust the quiet voice inside over the noisy opinions of the crowd. He gave permission to a generation to embrace their own crazy, to believe that their singular, perhaps odd perspective was not a liability, but the very thing that could dent the universe. He institutionalized the belief that the ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. It is a call to arms for anyone who has ever had a vision that others dismissed. Your difference is not your flaw, it is your filament. Let it glow. He never gave up, even on his last day. The cancer was not a signal to rest, it was a deadline. It compressed time, intensifying his focus, his urgency. He worked from a hospital bed, reviewing product plans, dreaming of the next disruption, inspiring his team to uphold the standard of insanely great. His physical body was failing, but his mission, the mission to create tools that amplified human creativity, was unfaltering. He saw his life not as a span of years to be preserved, but as a vessel for work that would outlast him. The mission was bigger than the man. In his final years, he wasn't wrapping up, he was launching the foundations for the next decade, the iPad, the plan for the Apple campus. He faced the ultimate limit not with surrender, but with a defiant focus on legacy. He showed that true perseverance isn't just about enduring the daily grind, it's about maintaining the clarity of your purpose even in the face of the final curtain. It's about spending your last breaths not on regret, but on blueprints. His life argues that the most powerful way to confront mortality is not to cower before it, but to live with such purposeful intensity that your work becomes a permanent part of the human landscape. You don't stop when you're tired, you stop when the work is done. And for a visionary, the work is never done. It is only passed on. He worked until the very end because the dream was always bigger than the day. Let your mission be bigger than your life.
Steve Jobs proved that failure is not the end. Giving up is. If you believe in your vision, stay consistent, and dare to think different, the world will eventually listen. Your setback might be your comeback. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what lesson you learned from Steve Jobs' journey.